Path of Non-Duality. Now, to explain non-duality is to basically have a reference to the two sides that people usually think of. People have their own measuring scales of what good and evil is. People have their own ideas of what teachings are the best, and a lot of the time, most of the time, they have the idea that their teaching is the way of good, the way of virtue. Whereas everyone else, whether they know it or not, according to them, is the path of evil. Maybe even a tool of Satan, a way of fooling man into not accepting the one true either prophet in Islam or the Son of God in Christianity. And there's a lot of Buddhists I've even heard that are very dogmatic in how they believe about their path relative to others. And there's Hindus even who are very dogmatic. But despite measuring scales, let's use the average one. Okay, let's say that I believe my teaching is the one true virtue. That it is, my measuring scale says that what I believe is good and what other people believe is evil. Now, for me to assume that is to live in an environment of bias. And that's not necessarily an external environment. It's one that we create for ourselves. It's one that we create within by rejecting certain ideas and saying that they're the worst and these are the best. The lack of nuance is a clue that somebody really doesn't think deeply about their path, or they've just inherited it and accepted it. Now, good and evil become mechanical. Basically, I'm always going to do these certain actions: give to the poor, help other people, proclaim my ideas about the truth. And it becomes mechanical. It becomes a thing in which I don't have a choice. And that just basically becomes the station that I take up. Now, when it comes to, let's say, evil people, now, there are very few people who call themselves evil. Their idea of evil is actually usually dogmatic religions, or the idea that there isn't this one spirit or God, or that this one prophet or this one Messiah or this one figurehead is not true, and anybody who rails against them is obviously evil. But let's narrow it down to like obviously evil acts, such as stealing, killing somebody, murdering them, not in war, but murdering them outright, and things like always pursuing your desires to do the most terrible things to other people, not desires just to smoke or drink. I'm talking about when people want to kill others, they choose to kill. That's the kind of evil that I'm talking about. Very blatantly evil. They hate this person, so they kill them, or they dislike somebody, so they really organize their life in a way that attacks that group or that person or that group of people. Now, that's blatantly evil in my own measuring scale. So their actions become mechanical as well. They will always follow what their desires say. They will always do what they want to do in order to satisfy their ego, their desires, and they will always fight against fear by removing the outward examples of fear, not their own fear within, which is a mistake. And this is true for people, so-called good people as well. They will always attack something external when it comes to fear, and they will not address it internally. But there's a wide spectrum. It's hard to say these are these kind of people and these are these kind of people. But evil can also become mechanical. An evil person will always try to satisfy their desires, regardless of the people around them, regardless of other people's desires, other people's well-being. They will always seek to be king of the hill, and if that means killing people, that's fine. I'm talking about very blatantly evil people. Now, these two sides, always doing the right thing, always doing, their version of the right thing on the evil side, which is the wrong thing, either side becomes mechanical. Either always following virtue and always doing things that aren't in line with your personal desires or wants or your own ego, but always working for the well-being and comfort of others and the betterment of others, or always doing it for yourself. Now, either way becomes mechanical. Either way, you lose an element of choice. Now you can say, every good action and every evil action has a choice in it, and it does. But for a lot of the time, people get into this rut. I'm talking about the two extreme cases, and there's a wide spectrum in between. They get into this rut, and they just keep on doing it. Some of the worst serial killers in the United States often said that they didn't believe other people were people. They treated them as objects. So even their subconscious is seeking to justify it. Even their understanding has become mechanical. And I'm kind of switching hands at this point, but even their understanding has become mechanical. And the people that do great things, that are wonderful, Martin Luther King, for instance, I name him a lot, but I really admire him like most other Americans do. His idea of civil rights, it became mechanical for him to basically use nonviolence and try to allow everyone to experience an equal and fair share out of societal privilege. That was his goal, so that everyone would get the same chance. Especially when it comes to laws like segregation. I mean, there's no good backing for segregation. Nowadays, it's less obvious because a lot of times somebody will be cheated out of a job because of their religion or skin color, but there's laws against it now. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And it certainly doesn't mean that cops won't go after black people just because there's laws against singling out minorities. But for Martin Luther King, doing good things became mechanical. So the element of choice was kind of taken out. Now, how do we get to a point where we are above and beyond this world, where we are basically the highest and beyond virtue, and still yet understanding evil and not choosing it? How do you gain the rightness of choice, still being a good person, but not being a robot, not being mechanical about it? How do you gain true choice and still be a good person because on one side you're bound by morals and on the other side you're bound by your desires and ego. So how do you gain choice? Now, this is where we get into non-duality. Non-duality is, it's a concept that's around the world. Hindus were probably, as far as archaeology is concerned, the first to really talk about non-duality, something that is beyond measuring scales, something that is beyond tamas, rajas, and sattva, which is darkness, restlessness, and purity. And in Hinduism, a lot of the time, purity, sattva, is described as the boat that gets you across the river of time, or the river of materialism, this universe and the multiverse, to the other shore. But once you get to that shore, once you reach greater union with the whole, with the source, then you leave that boat behind. That was sattva, that was purity, that was virtue. So non-duality is something that is very hard for us to conceptualize, because when it comes to non-duality, we can't use our own measuring scales. We can't accept that things are separate. We have to see past the separation between one action and another, see past the separation between one person and another. Now, as for my own path, for my own measuring skills that I'm using, I still believe in sattva and purity and virtue. And I have many times where I go towards desire. I'm in between on the spectrum. But I wouldn't say that I'm at either extreme of my own belief of the spectrum, my own measuring scale. So I still believe in using that boat to get to the other shore beyond the material universe. But what is the nature of non-duality? It is beyond conceptualization of a single platform, no matter what body you exist in, no matter what life you are, being you. You have to realize that you are beyond this thing that you classify as yourself, which really ties into your measuring scale, because yourself is very much tied into how you respond to other people based on how you think you've been slighted or how you think other people have been slighted, and trying to bring justice based on your own measuring scale. Now, there are people, like, for instance, in the Middle East, who think that if a woman goes outside and sees a friend, even if they didn't do anything sexual, that's adultery and they should be stoned to death. Based on their measuring scale, that's good. Now, I don't believe that for a second, but based on that measuring scale, they think that is goodness, that is rightness. And one way, while we're in the material universe, to really examine if a measuring scale makes sense, if it makes sense for humanity, does it allow us to move forward as a human race and not just exist in this torpor in between advancement and regression, even if even if we're at that torpor and we don't regress, we're still not moving forward. So the best way to really look at the measuring scales that we have here, before I talk more about non-duality, is to imagine everyone being, you imagine everyone, no matter who they are, being judged by that measuring scale based on the crime that they did, and you try to think if there are circumstances in which that measuring scale can adapt. Can that measuring scale adapt to circumstances? Now, a good measuring scale, one that is you could say righteous, it will always be able to adapt based on that person's motivation for what they did, based on that person's action against another, and be able to be flexible enough to where we won't get caught up by future advancements in human development. The most long-lasting measuring scales that we have archaeological proof of is in Hinduism. But getting out of the topic of measuring scales, when we get to non-duality, it is only something that can be experienced, it cannot be described. If you describe non-duality, then basically you're trying to conceptualize it. You're trying to conceptualize it within a framework. You're trying to box it in to the ideas that you conceptualize the universe through. So you can't place non-duality in a box, in the box that you use to understand the world around you and your relation to it. So it is only something that can be experienced. And, the first steps are, of course, not doing, say blatantly, just so we can move on from the point for the sake of brevity, not doing bad things. That's what it starts out as. Next step, doing good things. And these are very general terms. And then the next step is, of course, and you can meditate through all this and it'll help you with everything, but you have to focus on meditation, because through meditation we are able to calm down our ego, our desires, our sensory systems, and our seemingly need to fulfill our sensory desires. When we feel like we want to smoke, when we feel like we want to have sex, when we feel like we want to eat too much, these things can be limited without meditation. But it really helps with meditation to calm these sensory desires down. Make your senses work for you by making them more subtle, by calming them down and directing them inward. As Paramahansa Yogananda said, direct those floodlights within. Then that's when all of your senses can become more subtle and start sensing subtler things within your very being, within your very spirit. Now when you turn those floodlights within, start examining yourself, the lines, ironically, on the outside become more blurred. Now, this is through meditation. You can do even walking meditations to try to be aware and present and focus on what you're truly doing in your daily life. That'll make you more present as well, and the lines between you and the world will, shift and kind of realize, and we will realize their illusory nature. We will realize Maya and delusion. So, really breaking down, I'm not going to describe all the different spiritual techniques that will, in this video, that will, aid you in doing this. But the first step is to achieving non-duality, is to lessen your reliance upon material in this world, and then lessen your focus on it. You focus within. And then once you get a hint of the soul, once you get that spark, once you feel a little bit of that warmth, then you'll start to realize that warmth is in everyone else. That warmth defines the universe itself, within every life, within every planet, within every being, within every form in the universe. There is that similar and same warmth. Then that's when non-duality becomes more of a reality. And this is a gradual process, and I am not far along in that process, but I have done many spiritual practices, and I have studied much of ancient sages, whether it be Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, Vedantic teachings, or Vedanta, different bhakti teachings, a little bit of tantric mantra, and not to mention all the different magic, and connecting with the gods of my Northern European ancestors through Asatru and different pagan and even Wicca practices. There's so many of these things that can help you do that. Now, it's best to focus in one system. I wouldn't recommend doing what I'm doing, which is using a whole bunch of different systems and making them work together, which is incredibly difficult to do well, and I wouldn't recommend it. But achieving non-duality is about achieving a higher experience of who we truly are, and who we truly are is really one. So, non-duality cannot be described, it can only be experienced, and for you to reach that, you just have to start to question your measuring scale, relate it to the world, relate it to actuality, relate it to reality and how it functions, and even the strangest of circumstances. Lessen your dependence on sensory gratification, and focus those floodlights that are the senses within. And then, I will describe in the coming days different ways to do that, as I have in the last 700 videos that I've done. It's around 700. At any rate, it might be 600. I haven't really kept count. But at any rate, hey, thank you very much for watching. If you have any comments about non-duality, or you want to critique what I've just said, feel free to shoot it down in the comment section below there on YouTube. Hit that like button if you like this at all. If you're still fuzzy or unclear about certain things, you can ask in the comment section below. I will try to get to them, because I've been overwhelmed with comments recently, so I've been trying to make videos and do comments and work and do my spiritual path at the same time. So it's been interesting, and I hope to have you stick with me on my channel, and maybe we learn together. Really, this isn't about me teaching you; it's about us learning together. So hey, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see all of you in the future.